A man boards a flight from Beirut to Detroit, quiet, unremarkable, carrying a worn suitcase and a fresh start. He's left everything behind: family, friends, a lifetime of memories, believing distance will finally grant him safety. What he doesn't know is that 3 rows behind him sits a woman reading a magazine. Across the aisle, a businessman types on his laptop. Normal passengers on a normal flight. Except they're not passengers at all. And by the time his plane touches American soil, a file with his photograph has already been opened in Tel Aviv, marked with a single word: active. If this story intrigues you, hit that subscribe button now. We uncover the operations that remain hidden in plain sight, and you won't want to miss what comes next. This is the story of Karim Hassan, though that wasn't the name on his passport when he arrived in Michigan in 2003. This is the story of how a man can run halfway across the world and still never escape the shadows that track him. And this is the story of an intelligence apparatus so patient, so methodical, that it can watch a target for decades without ever moving, waiting for the precise moment when surveillance transforms into action. Karim Hassan was born in 1968 in Sidon, a coastal city in southern Lebanon where the Mediterranean meets ancient Phoenician ruins. His childhood unfolded against the backdrop of Lebanon's civil war, 15 years of sectarian violence that turned neighbor against neighbor and reduced Beirut to rubble. His father operated a small electronics shop. His mother taught at a local school. They were Shia Muslims, politically uninvolved, focused solely on survival in a country tearing itself apart. But geography determines destiny in the Middle East. Sidon fell within the sphere of influence of Hezbollah, the Shiite militant organization backed by Iran and Syria. As a teenager, Karim watched Hezbollah fighters become heroes in his neighborhood, defending against Israeli incursions and providing services the collapsed Lebanese government could not. By 1985, when he was 17, he had joined their youth wing, attracted not by ideology but by the sense of purpose and protection the organization offered. His role was modest at first, running messages between safe houses, helping distribute food and medical supplies to families displaced by fighting, learning the discipline of operational security: who to trust, what to say, how to move through checkpoints without attracting attention. These skills, developed in the chaos of war, would later define his life in ways he couldn't imagine. Israeli intelligence first flagged Karim in 1989 during a surveillance operation targeting Hezbollah logistics networks in southern Lebanon. His name appeared on a list of individuals associated with weapons transport, though the evidence was circumstantial: a single intercepted phone call, a sighting at a warehouse later linked to arms storage. The file was marked low priority. He was young, unproven, one of thousands of similar names in Mossad's databases. What elevated his status was an incident in 1992. An Israeli commando raid on a Hezbollah position near Sidon captured documents that included detailed manifests of weapon shipments from Iran through Syria into Lebanon. The handwriting on several documents matched samples previously attributed to Karim Hassan. The analysis suggested he had evolved from messenger to coordinator, someone with direct knowledge of supply chains that kept Hezbollah's military capabilities operational. Mossad upgraded his file to medium priority. Surveillance intensified. Over the next 3 years, intelligence operatives tracked his movements, photographed his meetings, and intercepted his communications. They learned he had married, that his wife was pregnant, that he had begun expressing doubts about continued involvement with Hezbollah. The doubts were significant. They suggested vulnerability, a potential opening for recruitment or manipulation. But before Mossad could exploit that opening, Karim made a decision that changed everything. In 1996, he told his Hezbollah superiors he wanted out. The request was dangerous. Organizations like Hezbollah don't accept resignations casually. Those who leave know too much, pose security risks, might be turned by enemies. Yet Karim had leveraged family connections to senior figures who vouched for his loyalty and discretion. After months of negotiation and psychological vetting, he was released from active service with stern warnings about the consequences of betrayal. For 5 years, Karim lived quietly in Sidon. He worked in his father's shop, raised his daughter, attended mosque, and avoided politics. Israeli surveillance continued but detected nothing actionable. He appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a former militant who had genuinely disengaged. The file remained open, updated periodically, but no longer actively investigated. Then came September 11, 2001. The attacks transformed global counterterrorism, creating new cooperation between intelligence services and new scrutiny of anyone with past connections to militant organizations. American agencies began sharing target lists with allies. Karim Hassan's name, buried in Mossad's databases, suddenly appeared on multiple watch lists. His prior association with Hezbollah, however peripheral, made him a person of interest in the post-9/11 security environment. Karim understood the danger immediately. Former militants across the Middle East were being arrested, interrogated, or simply disappearing. Some were guilty of ongoing activities. Others were swept up in dragnets driven by panic and political pressure. Karim had no current involvement with Hezbollah, but his past made him vulnerable. Proving innocence was impossible when intelligence services operated on suspicion rather than evidence. He made a calculated decision. He would leave Lebanon entirely, immigrate to the West where legal protections existed and past associations mattered less than present behavior. His wife's cousin had moved to Dearborn, Michigan years earlier and established a successful business. The cousin could sponsor them, help them navigate immigration processes, provide a foundation for starting over. The application process took 18 months. Background checks, interviews, medical examinations, financial documentation. American immigration officials scrutinized his history but found no definitive evidence linking him to terrorism. His Hezbollah involvement had occurred years ago, during Lebanon's civil war, when such affiliations were common among young men in certain regions. He had no criminal record, no travel to suspicious countries since leaving the organization, no financial transactions suggesting ongoing militant connections. In July 2003, Karim, his wife Layla, and their 7-year-old daughter Amira boarded a flight from Beirut to Detroit. He carried 2 suitcases containing everything they owned: clothes, photographs, a few books, and documents proving their identities and immigration status. As the plane lifted off, he looked down at the Lebanese coast, disappearing beneath clouds, and felt something close to relief. They were escaping, starting fresh, leaving behind a past that had become increasingly dangerous. What Karim didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that his immigration application had triggered automatic notifications across multiple intelligence databases. American agencies routinely shared information with allies under counterterrorism agreements. When his visa was approved, that information flowed to Mossad through established channels. Within 48 hours of his flight's departure, Israeli intelligence knew exactly where he was going, when he would arrive, and where he planned to settle. The woman reading a magazine 3 rows behind him was named Rachel Stein, though that wasn't her real name. She was a Mossad operative embedded in Beirut under diplomatic cover, specializing in surveillance of former Hezbollah members who had relocated or disengaged. She had been assigned to Karim's case 3 weeks earlier when his departure date became known. Her instructions were simple: observe, document, do not engage. Follow him from Beirut to Detroit, noting his behavior, his contacts, anyone who showed interest in him. The goal wasn't immediate action, but establishing a baseline understanding his new life so future. Surveillance could detect deviations that might indicate resumed militant activity. The businessman across the aisle was another operative, traveling under French credentials, responsible for photographic documentation and communication with handlers. Together, they formed a mobile surveillance team, invisible to Karim and his family, tracking them from boarding to arrival. The flight was uneventful. Karim spent most of it reading, occasionally checking on his daughter who slept against his wife's shoulder. He seemed relaxed, optimistic even. When the plane descended into Detroit Metropolitan Airport, he pressed his face against the window, staring at the city lights stretching toward the horizon. America, safety, anonymity. Immigration processing took 2 hours. Karim answered questions calmly, his English halting but functional. The officer stamped his passport, welcomed him to the United States, and directed him toward baggage claim. Rachel and her partner passed through different lines, maintaining visual contact but never approaching directly. In the arrivals hall, Karim's wife's cousin waited with a handwritten sign bearing their names. Emotional reunions followed hugs, tears, excited conversation in Arabic about the journey and the new life ahead. They loaded luggage into a minivan and drove north toward Dearborn, a suburb with one of America's largest Arab-American populations. Rachel followed in a rental car, staying 3 vehicles back, noting the route, the destination a modest apartment complex on the south side of the city. She watched them unload, saw lights turn on in a second-floor unit. Observed Karim standing on the balcony for several minutes, looking out at his new neighborhood. Then she drove to a hotel near the airport, uploaded her observations and photographs to encrypted servers in Tel Aviv, and waited for further instructions. Over the next 6 months, Mossad established comprehensive surveillance of Karim's life in America. The operation, codenamed Persistent Shadow, employed techniques refined over decades of tracking targets in foreign countries. Physical surveillance was minimal to avoid detection. Instead, Israeli intelligence relied on digital monitoring. Karim's phone records, internet activity, financial transactions all were accessible through partnerships with American agencies or through technical means that remain classified. The NSA, under post-9/11's information sharing agreements, provided metadata on his communications. Credit card companies, subpoenaed under national security letters, turned over purchasing patterns. What emerged was a portrait of profound ordinariness. Karim worked at his cousin's auto repair shop, changing oil and rotating tires. He enrolled his daughter in elementary school. His wife took English classes at a community center. They attended a local mosque, made friends with other Lebanese immigrant families, and lived frugally while saving money. There were no suspicious contacts, no unexplained trips, no financial anomalies suggesting hidden income or funding of external activities. By every measurable standard, Karim Hassan appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a former militant who had genuinely left that life behind and was building a peaceful existence in America. Yet Mossad maintained surveillance. The operational philosophy was straightforward. People don't change, they wait. Karim's disengagement from Hezbollah might be genuine or it might be temporary. Militant organizations sometimes instructed members to establish clean identities abroad, creating sleeper assets that could be activated years later when suspicion had faded. The fact that Karim showed no signs of current militant activity didn't prove innocence. It might simply prove patience. And Mossad, as an institution, understood patience better than most intelligence services. They had tracked targets for decades, watching, waiting, never moving until circumstances demanded action. In 2005, Karim's daughter Amira started middle school. She excelled academically, made friends easily, and spoke English without an accent. Her assimilation was complete in ways her parents could never be. Karim and Layla remained culturally Lebanese, their English always marked by the rhythms of Arabic, their social circles largely limited to other immigrants. But they were happy. Karim had saved enough to buy a used truck and start a small landscaping business. The work was physically demanding but honest, and he appreciated being his own boss. Layla worked part-time at a bakery. They moved to a larger apartment with 2 bedrooms. By American standards, they were lower middle class, but compared to the precarious existence they'd left in Lebanon, they were thriving. Mossad surveillance continued, now almost automated. Periodic reviews of his communications and financial records, occasional physical observation during mosque attendance or community events, photographs documenting his life's progression. The file grew thicker but revealed nothing threatening. In 2008, analysts in Tel Aviv conducted a comprehensive assessment. Should surveillance continue? Karim had been in America 5 years with no indication of resumed militant activity. Resources were finite, and dozens of higher priority targets demanded attention. The recommendation was to downgrade his file to inactive status, maintaining his name in databases but ending active monitoring. The recommendation was overruled. A senior officer noted that Hezbollah had recently increased operations recruiting sleeper agents in Western countries. The timing of Karim's immigration shortly after 9/11 could be coincidental or strategic. Until definitive evidence proved he posed no threat, surveillance would continue. That decision would prove consequential in ways no one anticipated. The year was 2010. Karim had been in America 7 years. His daughter was now a high school sophomore, his landscaping business employed 3 workers, and he had just purchased a small house in a quiet Dearborn neighborhood. The American dream realized through hard work and perseverance. On a June morning, Karim received a phone call that would shatter the peace he had built. The caller spoke Arabic with a Lebanese accent. Claiming to be an old friend from Sidon, he was visiting Detroit for business and wanted to meet, catch up on old times, perhaps have dinner. Karim felt uneasy immediately. The voice was unfamiliar. The explanation business in Detroit seemed vague. He hadn't maintained contact with anyone from his Hezbollah years, deliberately cutting those ties when he left Lebanon. Why would someone from that period suddenly reach out? He told the caller he was busy, that meeting wouldn't be possible. The man persisted, mentioning specific details about Karim's past names of people they'd supposedly worked with, events that were accurate enough to seem legitimate but vague enough to be researched. Karim ended the call abruptly, feeling a cold fear he hadn't experienced in years. The call was flagged immediately by NSA monitoring systems and automatically shared with Mossad. Analysts in Tel Aviv listened to the recording within hours. The caller wasn't a friend. He was a Hezbollah operative, part of a network attempting to re-establish contact with former members who had relocated abroad. The outreach was part of a broader Hezbollah initiative to identify potential assets in Western countries who could provide logistical support, intelligence, or simply safe houses if needed. Karim's refusal to meet was encouraging. It suggested he genuinely wanted no involvement. But Hezbollah's interest in him created a new threat equation. If Hezbollah believed Karim might be useful, they would continue attempting contact. If he continued refusing, they might use pressure threats against families still in Lebanon, blackmail, coercion. And if they succeeded in forcing his cooperation, he would become exactly the threat Mossad had been monitoring for years. Alternatively, Karim might report the contact to American authorities, cooperating fully and demonstrating his loyalty to his adopted country. That would eliminate concerns about his reliability, but it would also expose him as someone willing to betray former associates, making him a potential target for retaliation. Mossad faced a decision. Maintain passive surveillance and see how Karim responded? Increase monitoring to intercept any future communications with Hezbollah? Or take proactive action, making contact, offering protection, and attempting recruitment? The third option was chosen. If Karim was going to be pressured by Hezbollah, better he be protected and guided by Israeli intelligence than left to navigate threats alone. And if he proved willing to cooperate, he could become an asset himself, providing information about Hezbollah's recruitment networks. 2 weeks after the phone call, Karim received an unexpected visitor at his landscaping business. A man in his 40s, well-dressed, speaking fluent English with an American accent, introduced himself as David Miller from the Department of Homeland Security. He presented credentials that appeared legitimate, explained he wanted to discuss a sensitive matter, and suggested they speak privately. Karim's first instinct was panic. Had his visa status been challenged? Was his past catching up despite years of clean living? But Miller's demeanor was calm, almost friendly. He assured Karim he wasn't in trouble, that the conversation was purely informational, and that cooperation would be appreciated but not demanded. They sat in Karim's small office. Miller explained that American intelligence had intercepted communications indicating Hezbollah was attempting to contact former members in the United States. Karim's name had appeared in those communications. The recent phone call he'd received was part of that effort. "You're not suspected of anything," Miller said. "But we need to know if Hezbollah continues reaching out. And we need to ensure you're protected if they escalate their approach." Karim asked the obvious question, protected how? Miller explained that Homeland Security could provide guidance, help him recognize and report suspicious contacts, and if necessary, take measures to ensure his family's safety. In exchange, Karim would need to cooperate, fully disclosing any future contacts, sharing his knowledge of Hezbollah's historical operations, and being willing to testify if prosecutions occurred. It sounded reasonable. Karim had no loyalty to Hezbollah, no desire to be pulled back into that world. Cooperation seemed like the smart choice, but something about Miller felt slightly off, a hesitation in his speech. a way of phrasing questions that seemed too specific, as if he knew more than he was admitting. Karim agreed to cooperate but asked for time to consult a lawyer. Miller said that was fine, provided his business card, and left. The card listed ADC phone number and an official-looking email address. David Miller was not his real name. He was Avi Goldstein, a Mossad operative stationed in the United States under diplomatic cover, specializing in recruitment operations targeting Arab Americans with intelligence value. The credentials were real enough to pass casual inspection. The phone number led to a legitimate Homeland Security office where a cooperating officer would confirm Miller's identity if called. The approach had been carefully calibrated. Too aggressive and Karim would panic, potentially go to the media or seek legal protection that would complicate further action. Too passive and he might dismiss the threat, failing to recognize the seriousness of his situation. The goal was to position Mossad as protector and guide, building trust gradually until Karim became a willing asset. Over the following months, Karim met with Miller 3 more times. Each meeting extracted more information details about his time with Hezbollah, names of former associates, knowledge of operational procedures. Karim complied, believing he was helping American counterterrorism efforts. But he also began noticing inconsistencies. Questions about Israeli operations against Hezbollah that seemed outside Homeland Security's mandate. Requests for information about Lebanese political figures with no obvious relevance to terrorism. Small details that didn't quite align with what he understood about how American agencies operated. His suspicions deepened when he mentioned Miller to a lawyer friend familiar with Homeland Security procedures. The lawyer made inquiries and reported back that no David Miller worked for the Detroit field office, and that the business card's phone number, while real, routed to a general inquiry line, not a specific agent. Karim felt sick. He had been deceived, manipulated into revealing information to someone whose true identity and motives remained unknown. Worse, he had no idea what that information would be used for or how it might endanger him or others. He decided to stop meeting with Miller, ignoring calls and messages. But ignoring intelligence services once they've established contact is rarely simple. In late 2011, Karim received a letter at his home. No return address, postmarked from New York. Inside was a single photograph him sitting across from Miller in a cafe, deep in conversation, looking every bit like a willing informant. The message was clear without being explicit. We have evidence of your cooperation, and if you stop talking to us, that evidence could be used in ways you won't like. Hezbollah would love to know you've been meeting with American intelligence, so would certain members of your community. Karim understood the threat immediately. If that photograph reached Hezbollah, or even circulated among certain members of Dearborn's Lebanese community, he would be labeled an informant, a collaborator with American or Israeli intelligence. The consequences could range from social ostracism to physical danger. He was trapped. Refusing further cooperation meant risking exposure. Continuing meant becoming more deeply entangled in operations whose full scope he didn't understand. Either way, the peace he had built was disintegrating. For the first time since leaving Lebanon, Karim seriously considered running again. Perhaps to Canada, perhaps somewhere more remote. But his daughter was in high school, his business established, his wife's family nearby. Uprooting everything seemed impossible, especially when he had no guarantee that distance would actually provide safety. What Karim didn't fully comprehend was the scope of the surveillance surrounding him. Mossad hadn't just made contact through Miller. They had embedded themselves comprehensively in his life. His phone was compromised, his computer monitored, his movements tracked through vehicle GPS and facial recognition systems deployed at mosques and community centers he frequented. Every conversation he had, every email he sent, every financial transaction, all were visible to analysts in Tel Aviv. The operation had evolved from simple monitoring to active management. Mossad didn't just want information from Karim. They wanted to control his actions, his relationships, his potential utility as an asset. The calculation was coldly pragmatic. Karim Hassan posed no immediate threat, but he represented potential value. His knowledge of Hezbollah's historical operations could inform current intelligence assessments. His position in Dearborn's Lebanese community provided access to networks where radicalization might occur. and his desperation, once properly cultivated, would make him compliant. Intelligence services don't think in terms of right or wrong. They think in terms of useful or not useful, controllable or not controllable. Karim had become useful, and through careful application of pressure and incentive, he was becoming controllable. In 2012, Miller contacted Karim again, this time suggesting a meeting in a more formal setting, a secure office building in downtown Detroit. When Karim arrived, he was met not by Miller alone, but by two additional individuals who introduced themselves as senior officials from an unnamed federal agency. They laid out a proposition. Karim would formally become an informant, providing regular briefings on individuals within Dearborn's Lebanese community who might pose security concerns. He would attend community events, religious gatherings, and social functions, listening for expressions of anti-American sentiment, support for Hezbollah, or signs of radicalization. In exchange, he would receive financial compensation, modest but meaningful, and protection from any legal consequences related to his past. The photograph from the cafe? It would be destroyed along with any record of these meetings once his cooperation proved reliable. The offer was presented as non-negotiable, though phrased as a request. Refusal would result in exposure, potential immigration problems, and loss of protection from Hezbollah's continued interest in re-establishing contact. Karim felt the walls closing in. He had fled Lebanon to escape exactly this kind of coercion, yet here he was again, trapped between organizations that saw him only as an asset to be exploited or a threat to be neutralized. He agreed, not out of conviction but out of fear and exhaustion. What choice did he have? His life in America, the safety he thought he'd secured, had been an illusion all along. He had never truly escaped. Mossad had simply waited, patient and methodical, until the moment came when they could pull him back into their orbit. For the next 3 years, Karim operated as an informant. He attended mosque more regularly than his faith required, striking up conversations with newcomers, asking subtle questions about their backgrounds and views. He frequented Lebanese restaurants and cafes, sitting at neighboring tables, eavesdropping on conversations. Most of what he reported was banal political discussions, complaints about American foreign policy, nostalgia for home countries. Occasionally, he encountered individuals expressing more extreme views, support for militant groups or conspiracy theories about Western governments. These reports were passed to his handlers, who evaluated their significance. Karim never knew what happened with the information he provided. Did it lead to investigations, arrest, deportations? Were innocent people's lives disrupted because of his reports? The guilt accumulated, a weight he carried silently, unable to confide in his wife or daughter, unable to explain why he seemed increasingly withdrawn and anxious. His handlers compensated him modestly, a few $100s monthly, enough to supplement his business income, but not enough to suggest anything unusual to his family. The money felt like payment for his own degradation, compensation for betraying the community that had welcomed him. In 2015, Karim's situation reached a breaking point. His daughter Amira, now in college, had become politically active, participating in protests against American military interventions in the Middle East. She wrote essays for her university newspaper criticizing Israeli policies toward Palestinians. She was passionate, articulate, and completely unaware that her father was informing on the very communities she was defending. When Miller asked Karim about his daughter's activities, whether she had connected with any Palestinian solidarity groups, whether her professors were influencing her views, Karim finally refused. His cooperation had limits. He would not provide information about his own child. The refusal triggered consequences. Miller reminded him of the original agreement, the photograph that still existed, the protection that could be withdrawn. But Karim had reached a point where fear no longer controlled him. If they exposed him, so be it. He would not spy on his daughter. The standoff lasted weeks. Then Mossad made a decision. Karim Hassan had outlived his usefulness. His reluctance made him unreliable. His emotional attachment to family made him controllable only up to a point. And frankly, the intelligence he'd provided over 3 years had proven minimally valuable, mostly corroborating what other sources reported, rarely offering unique insights. The operation was quietly terminated. Miller stopped calling. The monitoring continued. Mossad never entirely closes a file on someone with Karim's background, but active management ceased. He was returned to passive surveillance, his life once again his own, at least superficially. Karim felt relief mixed with lingering paranoia. Were they really done with him? Or was this another manipulation, a test to see what he would do if he believed surveillance had ended? He couldn't know. Intelligence operations don't announce their conclusions. They simply fade into silence, leaving targets to wonder whether they're still being watched. In 2018, 15 years after arriving in America, Karim Hassan became a U.S. citizen. His daughter graduated college and started working as a social worker. His wife retired from the bakery. His landscaping business continued providing modest but stable income. To outsiders, his life appeared to be the quintessential immigrant success story: hard work, perseverance, integration, achievement. Only Karim knew how fragile that success had been, how close he'd come to losing everything, how thoroughly he'd been controlled and manipulated by forces he could neither see nor resist. Mossad's file on Karim Hassan remains open. It's updated periodically when he travels internationally, when he communicates with certain individuals, when algorithms detect patterns in his digital activity that warrant review. The classification is inactive monitoring, meaning no resources are actively dedicated to watching him, but his data continues flowing through automated systems that would flag anomalies requiring human attention. This is the reality of modern surveillance. Once you enter the system, you never fully leave. Intelligence agencies have long memories and infinite patience. They can watch you for decades without ever revealing themselves, tracking your life through digital footprints that you leave unconsciously every day. For Karim, the knowledge that he remains in those databases is a constant, low-level anxiety. Every phone call carries the possibility of interception. Every email might be read. Every financial transaction could be analyzed. The freedom he sought in America exists, but it's conditional, monitored, and could be revoked if circumstances change. The broader implications of his story extend beyond one man's experience. They reveal how intelligence services operate in the post-9/11 era, how surveillance has become ubiquitous and automated, and how individuals with past connections to groups designated as threats can never fully escape scrutiny, regardless of their current actions or intentions. Karim's case also illustrates the ethical complexities facing intelligence agencies. Was Mossad justified in maintaining surveillance on someone who showed no signs of ongoing militant activity? Were they right to recruit him as an informant, through coercion rather than genuine cooperation? Did the intelligence gain justify the psychological toll inflicted? These questions have no easy answers. Intelligence officials would argue that preventing threats requires monitoring potential risks, even when evidence suggests those risks are minimal. The cost of missing a genuine threat. Another 9/11s. Another Boston Marathon bombing is so catastrophic that excessive caution becomes institutionally rational. Critics would counter that surveillance without probable cause violates fundamental rights, that coercing informants through blackmail corrupts intelligence quality, and that treating entire communities as suspect populations breeds the very radicalization that surveillance aims to prevent. Both perspectives contain truth. The tension between security and liberty, between collective safety and individual rights, remains unresolved and probably unresolvable. Intelligence agencies exist in that tension, making decisions that balance competing values in ways that often satisfy no one. For Karim Hassan, these philosophical debates are irrelevant. He lives with the practical consequences, the paranoia, the guilt, the knowledge that his past will always shadow his present. He's built a good life despite these burdens, but it's a life lived with constant awareness that he's never been entirely free. The woman who sat 3 rows behind him on that flight from Beirut to Detroit retired from Mossad in 2016. She never knew Karim's name or what happened to him after that initial surveillance. Her role was narrow: observe, document, report. The broader operation was compartmentalized, information shared only on a need-to-know basis. She occasionally wonders about the people she tracked over her career. Did they pose genuine threats, or were they simply caught in systems designed to err on the side of caution? She never know. Intelligence work provides few answers and even fewer closures. Karim's daughter, Amira, married in 2019. Her father walked her down the aisle, proud and emotional, reflecting on how far their family had come. During his speech at the reception, he talked about the importance of home, family, and the courage it takes to start over in a strange land. He didn't mention surveillance, informants, or the years he spent trapped between competing forces. Those experiences remained private, locked away, shared with no one. Perhaps someday he'll tell his daughter the full truth about his time in America. But not yet. Some stories are too complicated, too painful to share while you're still living them. What does Karim Hassan's story reveal about the world we live in? That distance provides no real escape when intelligence services have global reach. That past associations can haunt you indefinitely, regardless of present behavior. That surveillance has become so pervasive and automated that privacy is increasingly an illusion maintained only through ignorance of how thoroughly we're being monitored. It reveals something else too: the human cost of security measures. Karim was neither a terrorist nor entirely innocent. He had been involved with Hezbollah, albeit peripherally, during a period when such involvement was common among young Lebanese men. He had genuinely disengaged and built a peaceful life. Yet he could never fully escape the consequences of choices made decades earlier in a different world. Intelligence agencies operate in moral gray zones where perfect justice is impossible and every decision involves trade-offs. Karim's surveillance and recruitment might have prevented nothing, or it might have provided puzzle pieces that, combined with other intelligence, helped disrupt genuine threats. The people making those decisions will never know with certainty whether they were right. What is certain is that surveillance continues, not just of Karim Hassan, but of thousands of individuals whose names appear in databases, whose past associations or present communications trigger algorithmic alerts, whose lives are monitored by systems that operate beyond public oversight or democratic accountability. These systems exist because threats exist. Terrorist organizations do recruit sleeper agents. Former militants sometimes return to violence. Intelligence services have genuine responsibilities to identify and prevent attacks. But systems designed for security can easily become tools of control, and the line between protection and oppression is thinner than we'd like to believe. Karim Hassan lives in that ambiguity. He's a free man in the sense that he works, raises his family, and participates in his community without obvious restrictions. But he knows he's being watched, that his freedom is conditional, that one wrong move could bring consequences he can't predict. He's built a good life anyway, because the alternative is despair. He takes pride in his daughter's achievements, in the business he built from nothing, in the home he owns and the community he's joined. These accomplishments are real, even if they exist within a surveillance apparatus he can neither see nor escape. On quiet evenings, Karim sometimes stands on his porch, looking out at his Dearborn neighborhood, and remembers that first night in America when everything seemed possible. The optimism he felt then has been tempered by experience, but not entirely extinguished. He's learned to live with complexity, with moral ambiguity, with the knowledge that freedom is always partial and safety always provisional. Maybe that's the most honest truth about modern life. We're all being watched more than we realize. Our data collected and analyzed by systems we don't control, our privacy eroding in ways we barely comprehend. Karim's experience is extreme, but in its essence, it's not unique. We all live in surveillance networks that track our movements, communications, and transactions, justified by security concerns that are both real and exaggerated. The difference is awareness. Most people don't know they're being watched, or they know abstractly, but don't feel it viscerally. Karim knows. He feels it every day, and perhaps that awareness, painful as it is, grants him a kind of clarity the rest of us lack, the understanding that privacy and freedom are precious precisely because they're so easily lost, and that once lost, they're almost impossible to fully regain. If this deep investigation into surveillance, identity, and the price of escape resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. We bring you stories that go beyond headlines, exploring the hidden realities that shape our world. Your subscription helps us continue this important work. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how intelligence operations actually function in our modern age. And drop a comment below with your thoughts. Do intelligence services have the right to monitor former militants indefinitely? Where should the line be drawn between security and civil liberties? We want to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember the most important stories are often the ones nobody wants you to know.